Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, today we'll pick up where we left off in Kitab al-Sawm. And we talked about the beginning, we talked about the conditions for Sawm to be obligatory. And we talked about these. These are basically all the same conditions that we have for Salah. Just add the extra condition of being able to do it. So just like the ability to fast, of course, that's the extra condition. And then we also talked about the actual. He says وَفَرَائِضُ الصَّوْمِ أَرْبَعَةُ أَشْيَاء, in which is there's four farida is like the individual, which means like arkan is what he means here, like the pillars. The pillars of Sawm there's four, and the first one is niyyah. And we talked a little bit about this. In the niyyah, the time has to be before the actual action. So we have Sawm, and so the niyyah needs to come before the Sawm starts. Just like as we have Salah, the niyyah needs to come before we make the takbiratul ihram. And so this is similar to that. And also the Prophet ﷺ said that there's no Sawm for the person lam yubayyit niyat, lam yubayyit, like the one who didn't make the Bayyit is like having that niyyah or that intention. Man lam yubayyit as-siyama ila qabla al-fajr fala siyama lah. And so like the person who didn't have that tabeet, which we call it tabeet, which is that niyyah or that intention to make the fasting that next day, then there's no Sawm for him. And of course, if it's in Ramadan, he has to still fast. But he has to make up this day of fasting, because the day of Ramadan itself, it needs to be fasted. Even if you messed up the fast, you still need to fast. If you don't have that like an excuse that keeps going, like if you say you forgot to make the niyyah, okay, you forgot to make the niyyah, but you still need to fast, and you make up that day for fasting because it's incomplete. But the Ramadan itself needs to be fasted in, whether or not it's fasting according to all of its conditions, or whether you're missing something from it. But you still need to have at least the picture of fasting. You can't be eating and drinking and say, "Oh, I forgot." And the same thing if someone like broke their fast intentionally. They still need to finish out their fast and whatnot, even though they make it up. And so this is the first one, which he says an-niyyah, and also this happens before Fajr. And also, of course, this is the basic thing. Of course, if someone's making up the fast for another day, they need to have the intention that they're making up a fast. So say you're making a fast for Ramadan, you need to have the intention that you're making up a fast for Ramadan. Like this is qada. And this is normally, and if you're fasting during Ramadan, this is normally enough, because fasting is normally done in Ramadan. And if you're fasting for like the other days, then the important thing is that you fast on the other days that you're fasting. Say like if you're fasting on Mondays or Thursdays, like this is a sunnah, and you don't necessarily have to have this is the Monday or Thursday fast. You're fasting on this day, this is good. And the same thing if you're fasting on like Yom al-Tasu'a or Ashura. So these are also days that it's sunnah for someone to fast on. And if you fast on these days, even like the important thing is that you fast on it. Like whether or not, it's like when you come into the masjid, do you need to have the intention that you're making tahiyyat al-masjid, or is it just any salah that you do accomplishes the purpose of praying 2 rakat before you sit down? So like this is like with tahiyyat al-masjid, any 2 rakat count. Whether it's fard, whether it's sunnah before fajr, whether it's a sunnah before like a sunnah before maghrib, or sunnah before dhuhr. Any of these, it doesn't matter which one it is. Anything that's 2 rakats, even if it's a fard. So even if you're making up something on Yom al-Tasu'a, inshallah you'll get or Yom al-Ashura, or and like the Yom al-Nahr, like this, inshallah you'll get the reward for that day, even if you're making up something. So it doesn't have to be a certain intention for that, inshallah. So this is the first one he says, a niyyah. And of course, like having the intention for that is very important. And also, wal imsak wa anil akli wa shurbi wal jima' wa ta'ammud al-qay'. And so, and also these are the other things that someone needs to have imsak, which of course is the meaning of siyam in general. Like siyam means imsak, which is like holding back from something. And he says anil akli wa shurb. And so, like, of course, eating and drinking, wal jima', and also having intercourse. And this is not just intercourse, but also like istimna, like masturbation or something of this sort. Of course, this is haram, but if someone did this, it would also break their Sawm. Like if they actually ejaculated from it, it would break the Sawm. And also he says here, with ta'ammud al-qay', and also to intend to throw up. this is also something that will break the fast, and this comes from a hadith that has been authenticated by many, which is the Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever is overcome by man dara'ahu al-qay'u falyutim sawmahu, and so like whoever has been overcome by qay, and qay is throwing up. Whoever's been overcome by the vomiting, he didn't intend to do it, but it happened, then he should, or فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْهِ قَضَاء, and so there's no qada on him. Like he just keeps going and finishes out the day, and there's nothing he needs to make up. وَمَنِ اسْتَقَى وَمَنِ اسْتَقَاءَ عَمْدًا فَلْيَقْضِي. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever that's istiqa, which is like talab al-qay', which is like asking for, or like trying to throw up, so making yourself throw up. Then he says فَلْيَقْضِي sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So this person should do this, if he does this purposefully, amdan, and فَلْيَقْضِي. So if he did this purposely, trying to throw up purposefully and whatnot, then he needs to make up the fasting. And does he make up the fasting because possibly something went back down into his throat? Some of them said this, and some of them said no, it's just because the Prophet ﷺ, he said whoever did this, then he needs to make it up, regardless of whether anything came down into his throat or not, from the like the throwing up and whatnot. And this is something that this is what came in the shariah, and we don't understand all the reason for it, but this is something that has been narrated, so we take it and say that this is something that breaks the sawm, from what the Prophet ﷺ said. And so the next thing that he brings up here, after we mention these things, is, and there's also one other. All right, we'll say, and there's also another condition that someone should also know, is like they should know when the beginning of when the time comes in and when the time ends, and like it's especially when the time comes in. Someone should know when the time comes in for Sawm so that they can stop. So like having that understanding when the time comes in, and they also need to know the time ends for them to eat. So if they eat before knowing that the time ended, like accidentally, they ate thinking that the time had ended, but they weren't sure of it. And then they found out afterwards, oh, I ate before the time ended, In this case, they like the basis is that the thing is as it was until proven otherwise. So the day, it still exists, like the Nahar Ramadan, it still exists until proven otherwise. And so if he ate without getting that proof otherwise, then he has to make up this day. But let's say he was eating a sahur, and he didn't hear the adhan, and he thought the adhan didn't make it, but he is still eating. In this case, he wouldn't make up the day if he did this unintentionally, because the basis is that the night was still going until proven otherwise. So in this case, it's a little different. So the person who ate at night, and he thought he was going and going, and then he thought like the adhan didn't come yet, but it went like 5 minutes ago or whatever, and he wasn't paying attention, or there was noise and something. That in this case, he doesn't need to make up the day. He finishes off and it's fine. But the person who broke his fast early without proof or evidence, he's the one who needs to make up his day. And so this is also another thing that someone should know as a part of the arkan. This is sometimes mentioned as part of the arkan in knowing both sides of the day. Tarafay nahar. And so the next thing he says here, وَالَّذِي يُفْطِرُ and بِهِ الصَّائِمُ عَشْرَةُ أَشْيَاء. There's more than 10, but he says here that what breaks the sawm, is 10 things. There's 10 things here that break the sawm. There are 10. And he says, مَا وَصْلَ عَمْدًا إِلَى الْجَوْفِ أَوِ الرَّأْسِ. So this is the first thing that he says here. مَا وَصَلَ, so anything, this is مَا, this is الَّذِي. مَا وَصَلَ عَمْدًا, and this is also another key point, amdan, that he intended to do this actions. And this is like knowing that he's fasting. So it's not like he was doing it accidentally, like he was drinking accidentally, he forgot that it was Ramadan. But it's the thing that he ate amdan ila al-jawf, and this is the key thing. And jawf is a opening, like one of the openings. And of course, the opening here is something that's going to give nourishment, such as like the mouth, and also in the nose, and also like if someone was to take like like if they were to take a suppository, like from like the backside or whatnot, this also is a jawf. So this would also break their sawm, anything that's entered into that. And so anything that enters into one of these jawf, amdan, like anything that enters into the jawf, amdan. And then he also says awir rats, anything that enters the head. And this is because of the like if somebody took ear something, sometimes if they took like a eardrops or something of this sort, this might enter into their body. And so here is what he says, is this would also break it. And also the same thing, some of them would enter on this particular view. Then also someone putting like eye drops in, this would also break their soul. And so these are two extra things that are kind of mentioned. And the stronger opinion is that these don't break. These don't break. The thing that breaks, something that's entered into the body from one of the areas that can actually receive nourishment and replenishment, and that enters the body in a place of nourishment and replenishment, such as like in the trachea or in the nose, or in like one of the two pathways. So these are the things that would break the som, as opposed to from other than these pathways. And he also says wal huknatu fi ahadi sabilain. And so he says here al hukna. And like, of course, if you hear hukna in like modern days and age, a lot of times this will refer to a shot. If somebody gets a shot, they'll call it a hukna. But the hukna here that's being referred to, this is you'd call it a suppository. It's like a rectal suppository, or like from the other end, number one or number two, something that's entered in as like a, normally this is done as like a something that is like a ilaj, or like some type of if somebody's sick and whatnot. Sometimes kids like have fevers and whatnot, they'll give them this. But this is like anything that's entered in one of these ways. Even this would break the fast. Also a finger, like if part of a finger entered into one of these, this would also break the fast as well. So any one of these things, if part of a finger entered into it to that point, to where it's no longer the outside, but it's actually considered the inside, and then at this point it would break his fast. And he also says wal qai'ul amdan. And also we mentioned this, which is the qai', which is throwing up on purpose. And he also says wal wat'u amdan. And also what, which is intercourse, which is like he says wat'un al wat'u amdan fil farj. And so like these are all conditions here. Al wat, of course, intercourse, and it's not just any like intercourse, but it's the intercourse that happens while this person is knowledgeable that he's supposed to be fasting. That fasting is obligatory on him. He's knowledgeable of the fast, amdan, and he's breaking it. And he also says fil farj, like that it actually went into a farj. If it's outside of it, then it didn't. Then this doesn't break the fast. So such as if he was say he was with his wife or something, and he went far, but he didn't actually enter anything into anything. So in this case, he doesn't need to make up this day, as long as he didn't have any inzal, or like he didn't, like no semen came out, then his fast is still valid. But of course, he shouldn't be going to this area, and this could be like, you could be sinful for doing this. But if it's in the farj, then this has a whole. Actually has its whole ahkam. It actually takes the kafara, which will be dealt with after this chapter.
What do you mean by he could be sinful for?
Like someone who has basically, we're supposed to be fasting on Ramadan, and so if someone takes the path to something that's going to break their fast, then this is something that they shouldn't do. And so if they're going to put themselves right up next to sin, then this is something they shouldn't do. And also like the view of the Shafi'i method is that the person that kisses his wife is actually like doing something that's haram. Some of them said makruh, and some of them said it's haram. Like to actually kiss the person's wife, especially for the one whose shahwat is moved by it, because this is something that's leading you right to breaking your fast, and this should not be done. And of course, there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ used to kiss some of his wives while he was fasting. And then when Aisha was asked about this, she was like, and then who is like him when it comes to controlling his urges? Like none of you are like the Prophet ﷺ when it comes to controlling himself, and so you guys are different. So like pointing at that meaning of that, Allah Ta'ala alam. But of course, like if someone is going to push themselves to the edge of like desire and whatnot, when it comes to this is Ramadan, and you could break this fast at any moment. Especially like that's something that should be definitely avoided, and can be sinful if they're throwing themselves into fasad and whatnot. Even if they don't actually go to the point of where they broke their fast itself. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so he also says, well, inzalu an mubasharatin. And so like inzal Inzal is like, this is the other side of it. Like, say he didn't actually have wat, but he was, say he was with his wife and one thing went to the next, and then he came. And so like this, like the many exiting, this breaks his fast, and his fast is no longer valid. And this is, he says, an mubashara, which means that he was touching. Mubashara is the touching. So like, there was back and forth touching going on. And so, and this would also go with like, if someone was doing like istimna, which is like masturbation, which is, it's just haram. This also breaks as well. But if he was just sitting there saying, he was sitting there, or he was asleep and he had a wet dream, no problem. That doesn't, he didn't do it. This is not an mubashara. This is not something he did. It happened to him. And the same thing if he was looking at, say he was looking at his wife or something, and all of a sudden it happened. He didn't do anything. He's like mukrah, and like as long as he didn't do any movements for himself, this happened to him and nothing happened. Like this guy's in that state. But so in this case, like there would be no making up on him. But if he was actually doing movements like touching or doing some types of movements, and he was the one actually making this happen, in this case, then he has to make up that fast, and he's sinful, of course, for breaking his fast. And so this is inzal an mubashara, and the same thing is like if anything with the wife and all of that stuff, that all falls in there. And so then the next one, wal haidu, and of course the woman's not sinful for having haid, but it breaks her fast. And this is of the conditions for the fast to be accepted, is that the person is free from haid. Like they can't be in the state of haid. Of course, like someone can be junub and their fast can be valid. Of course, they make the ghusl so that they can pray, but that doesn't invalidate the fast. But haid itself, it invalidates the fast. And this comes from what is narrated from Aisha radiallahu anha, that she was asked by one of the people from Harura, or not from Harura. What she was asked by one of the Sahabiyat about like what's the deal with the woman that she makes up her fasting, but she doesn't make up her sawm. Or like she makes up her fasting, but she doesn't make up her salah. And so then she asked her, like, are you Haruriya? Which is like the people these are like the Khawarij that went to extremes in their deen. And she said, no, but I want to know. And she said, this is what we were ordered with. We were ordered with to make up our fasting, and not ordered with, and we're not ordered to make up our salah. And of course, the fasting can be made up. It's easy. As opposed to the salah, this is going to be hard for a woman to make up all of her salah, like how many days every single year, and this is keep coming back. But of course, the fasting is just a few, like 7 days, or at the most, like 7 days. Normally, that would happen, that she would have to make up, which is not a huge amount. And so also haid, it breaks it. So even if, this is also another note, that a woman, if she knows her period's going to end, like say she knows her period's going to end, but it's going to end after the beginning of Fajr. When Fajr came in, if she was still on her period, that day is no longer valid. So there's no fasting upon her. She can eat, drink, whatever, be merry. That day won't count for her. Even if she has the intention, she thinks that her period's going to end maybe before Dhuhr or something. No. If any type of haid was at any point of the day from the beginning of Fajr to Maghrib, then that day is no longer counted. And the same thing from the other side. Say she was fasting, and then 5 minutes before Maghrib, the period came. All right, khalas, that day no longer counts for you. Malish. So this is something that should, of course, like women need to know this. And I've heard some women with very strange opinions about this thing that was not based on any knowledge. But no, any bit of hayd that comes at any day and part of the day, it invalidates the sawm altogether. And of course, sawm has to be from the beginning of Fajr to the end of Maghrib. It encompasses all of this time. So anything in it that breaks, just like if you have any time in the salah that you broke your wudu or something, it's no longer valid. The salah is no longer valid. It's from the beginning to the end. And the same thing with sawm. It's from the beginning of Fajr to the end of Fajr. And this is for the obligatory sawm. And for sunnah, this is something that someone can start up later on, and this is something that in the Shafi'i madhab, someone can start up their sawm later on if it's sunnah. So if they didn't intend to sawm, they didn't intend to fast, and then they wake up, Or then they go about their day and they realize, oh, I don't have any food, but I want to make it a fasting. I'm just going to go fasting. This is something they can start up in the middle, like halfway through the day or something of that. There's no problem with that, and they get rewarded according to that. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
That means the person did not eat or drink anything before, so.
Even if they did, but yeah, it's best if they didn't eat or drink. Yeah, this is like the stronger opinion would be if they didn't eat or drink. If they did eat or drink, then there's a bigger khilaf that comes here. That can they still do it or not? And like of the opinions is that they can. And this is Ahmed Makrami, Sheikh Ahmed Makrami, Hafidhullah. He says yeah, and some of them would say no, like considering that they didn't eat or drink yet. And this is what the hadith comes in the ones that didn't eat or drink. The Prophet ﷺ, he would sometimes he would come into the day and he would ask his wives, is there any food in the house? And if they said no, he would say that I'm fasting. And so this is where you would get that from that hadith, that okay, if he said if he based it on that, then he says he's fasting now, then of course this is okay for someone to take their niyyah in late for something that's not obligatory. Of course, obligatory has to be from the very beginning to the end. And so he also says here, and so nifas and also hayd and nifas, they're the same pretty much with most of the rulings. They get the same treatment. So these two would come into the same categories for the most part. If nifas happen, of course, the postpartum bleeding, all the time that the postpartum bleeding takes up, then there's no fasting that's valid during that. And of course, she would have to make it up afterwards. And also the wal junoon. So if someone loses their sanity, then of course this would also make it to a point where their fasting is no longer valid, and also they wouldn't have to make it up though, because they're not called to do a person who's majnoon is not called to do the fasting. And then also he says here the last of them is waruridda. And the ridda, of course, na'udhu billah min dharik. But this would be something that invalidates the person's fasting, because of course, no a'mal are accepted unless this person is coming with iman. If he doesn't have iman, this is the first of the conditions for a'mal to be accepted. So he's not coming with iman, and he is already entered into Islam, and then he left. There's a difference between this. He has to make it up. So if he comes back into Islam, he has to make up these days. As opposed to the person who came in as a new Muslim, because all of his sins are previously forgiven and whatnot, and he comes in with a clean slate. But this guy, he was already supposed to be fasting, and then he ran away from Islam, and then he's going to come back and think that he got away with all that time without fasting. And the Shafi'is are they're strict when it comes to ridda. This person needs to make up all the things that they missed, whether it was zakah, whether it was som, whether it was salah. All of these things that he missed, he was asked to do that, and he knew that this was obligatory upon him. And then him running into kufr doesn't save him from that obligation. And so this is something, of course, he's expected to come with Islam and also come back with the action there, and because he's already been he doesn't get that ruling taken away from him once it was established. And so these are 10 things that he mentioned here, these things that break the som, and there's actually more things than this. And from the first one they mentioned, ma wasla amdan ila al-jawf. If we just took it here, and then this is there's a lot of examples of this, and I'll talk about some of these examples of modern day examples, just so we can look at them. I'm first going to give you some of them that will break it, and of these is an inhaler. So if somebody has an inhaler and they go, pfft, this is actually an actual thing that they're inhaling, and this thing goes into their lungs. This is the jawf. It goes inside and it comes into their lungs, into a place where it's received into the body. This actual thing is received into the body as an actual substance. So because this actual substance is received into the body, then this is something that would break the fast. Of course, if this person has a medical necessity, he's along with the sick people that have an excuse. He makes it up in another day when he can. But the inhaler does break the fast. And also, this, of course, is like cigarettes. You're bringing an actual substance into the body. This breaks the fast. So if you see someone smoking on the day of Ramadan, tell them it's haram and your fast is not valid. Of course, some of these people, they want to take weird fatwa out there, But like, no, this is something they should know, that they're not allowed to be sitting out there on the street smoking during the day of Ramadan. And like some of these people, they do that in Jahala here. But of course, like this is something that breaks the fast. Also, hookah, same thing. And pills break the same thing. It's an actual thing that's entering into the jof. Also, an enema. This is something that's entering into a jof from the backside. This is something entering into the body, and this entering actually breaks it. As soon as something enters into that passageway, it breaks. And that's with anything. And also like colonoscopy, same thing. Anything in the nose and mouth that goes down and goes past the kha, you have the makhraj kha or ha. This makhraj is the breaking line of zahir and batin, like the exterior of the person and the interior. Anything that passes down the kha, like past kha, then this, if they entered something down there, then this breaks the som, whether or not it's something that you would eat or not. Like if it was a rock or something that you put down there intentionally, then yeah, it breaks the som. And also like the catheter, this would also be something that breaks in, because it's something that's inside. You put something inside to put that in. And also swallowing phlegm, because once you pull up the phlegm from what's down, once it comes out, then if you swallow it again, you're putting something that's already come out from the zahir, and you're putting it back down. So this is something that someone should, of course, if they do it knowingly, they knew that they're not supposed to do it, and they did it aware. If they did it unknowingly, then this is forgiven. But if they do it knowingly, then this is something that breaks the som. And also the same thing when it comes back to salah. Anything that breaks siyam also breaks salah. In general, like this is a general principle. So anything that breaks siyam also breaks salah. And so swallowing phlegm also would be like a means of breaking salah if the person did it knowingly, while understanding that this is haram. Like they did it knowingly, intentionally, knowing that it is haram for them to do, and they did it. Then in this case, it would break the fast and or the actual salah. Also, tasting things is okay. Those are the things that are tasting. Like if you're going to taste food, this is okay because you're not actually entering it into the jof. You're just putting it on the outside, and it goes in. And like this is smelling sense. You're not actually putting an actual thing in there. Yes, you're breathing, but everyone breathes. And this is not like as opposed to an inhaler, you're actually putting an actual thing inside. But like smelling, this is not actually like putting something inside. Also, blood donating. This is different because you're taking something out, and it's not from a jof. You're not putting the needle's not going into like an actual opening to the body, but rather you're making an opening and whatnot. Just like if someone was getting stabbed, this doesn't break the som. And blood donating, this doesn't break it. Blood testing doesn't break it. Cupping doesn't break it. And even though there's a hadith that talks about the person who did hijam, and also the person who made hijam and the person who had it done on him, both of them aftara, both of them broke their fast. This is a hadith that's understood as it's either mansukh, or it's something that is taken in a different context, such as this person. It's as if they did this, because this is something that's very strong. It's very hard on the body, or at least for the person who had hijama. This is something that's tiring on the body, and for him to do hijama and something that's tiring on the body, then this is something that's hard, and he's probably going to have to get some nourishment or something from that. And also the Prophet ﷺ, he had hijama done while he was fasting. And so because of this, we take this as that this is something that's permissible for it to be done. And it doesn't break the actual fast. And also skin ointments, creams, doesn't break the fast. Skin patches doesn't break the fast. So if someone had a nicotine patch they're getting off of cigarettes, then okay, this doesn't break the fast. Yes, it has an effect that it's doing. Yes, it's entering something into the body, but it's not entering into a food passage. It's entering from the outside, just like and getting absorbed. And the same thing if someone did like henna, and they taste the henna, like after they've done henna on like their hands or whatever. Sometimes you can taste the taste of that. It doesn't break that, because it's something that's entered in from the outside and not from one actual jof. Like ear and eye drops, the stronger the opinion and not the opinion of the author here, but the stronger of the opinions that is given by such as Muhammad Salim al-Bahiri, Hafidhullah, he says that this is something that on the stronger view is that it doesn't break. And he has a whole paper that talks about these things, and this is from that paper that he wrote. A lot of these modern day issues, that this wouldn't break, the ear and eye drops, because this is not going into an actual opening for food. So when you put an eardrop in, if something comes down here, this is kind of like if something, like some of the tissues sometimes just like pick up moisture and whatnot. Same thing with eye drops. This doesn't necessarily break it. As opposed to nose drops. Nose drops would break it. If it goes down and it enters, anything that enters, that breaks it. Acupuncture, needling doesn't break it. Gum, if there's anything inside the gum, it breaks it because of the thing that's entered alongside of the gum. So if you have you have some type of flavored gum and whatnot, and there's sugar that's coming in from it, that breaks it. But if you say you had a gum that had nothing on it, it was like the gum that was old and worn out, and there's no taste, no anything, he's just chewing on like a piece of plastic. In this case, he's just chewing. There's nothing that's entering, and it doesn't break. But of course, like if it's actual gum, like it's new gum, and it has any type of taste or flavor, it's something that of that sort, then it would break anything that's entering. It's going to break if it has anything mixed in. Also, under tongue pills and strips, this also breaks it. Sometimes there's little strips that someone will take for certain medical purposes, and this would break it. And swimming, there's also another thing. Swimming is not supposed to be done when someone is fasting, and the reason is because when you go into water, you're almost certainly going to swallow something. You're putting yourself at a point where you know you're putting yourself in a place where it's as if you are opening yourself up to swallowing water. And so because of that, when water comes in, you're not ma'zur. In this case, you're not excused because you put yourself out under risk. So the person who normally would be excused for something, like say he wasn't swimming and something like fell into his mouth, such as like dirt came into his mouth, or like a fly flew into his face while he was on like he opened his mouth while he was on a motorcycle. He ate a fly. Okay, this doesn't do it because because he's not expecting this. But when he was in the water, he knows that this is probably going to happen. And so once it happens, he's not excused from it. It'll break his fast. Of course, if someone's saving someone from if someone's saving somebody from drowning, this is something that's obligatory, and he makes up his fast afterwards.
So just to be clear, he break his fast once he swallows it, though?
Once he swallows the water, yeah. And he shouldn't do it in the first place. So he shouldn't do it because he's opening himself up to breaking the fast. And once he swallows the water, it breaks. But if he didn't swallow any water, then no. Like just wading around in water is not going to do anything for him. But if he's actually swimming, like swimming. And also toothpaste, as long as nothing is swallowed, it's okay. Food bits in the teeth, if he swallows this food bits, sometimes people are eating, and then all of a sudden they hear that then, what do you do now? You spit out whatever's in your mouth, and you also should kind of rinse out whatever's in your mouth so that you're not eating whatever's between your teeth after then. Anything that's eaten and swallowed, amdan, like intentionally, this breaks the fast. So this is something people should be mindful after the adhan. And this is also the same thing. The people in Maghrib, they're breaking their Maghrib salah by eating the rest of the dates while they're in salah. Like they got little date bits between their teeth, and they're still munching away during salah. When they swallow an actual bit of date, then they broke their salah by eating in salah, because this breaks the salah. So this is something someone should be careful. Like if they're going to eat their dates, eat your dates and wash your mouth or clean with the siwak or whatever. And if there's any date bits that come while you're in salah, spit them out. Have a little something to spit them in, but don't swallow it. If you swallow it intentionally, you broke your salah. And these are some of the things that someone can do. And also just another note for women, if a woman wants to not have her period on Ramadan and she's on the pill, and she can extend her taking of the pill and like kind of mess with the pills so that she extends it so where she doesn't have any fasting or she doesn't have any period in Ramadan, and she can extend it that way as long as there's no harm on her, that's fine. Like she can do that if she wants to. If she's like on a birth control pill, or if she has another type of pill that she can take to stop her period from coming, this is fine, and it would allow her to do this. And this will come up with Hajj as well. If she's on Hajj or Umrah and whatnot, and she needs to catch like she has a plane or whatever that she's going to do, and if she comes onto her period, it's going to be a big problem for her because she can't make tawaf. So in this case, using this is also another thing that she can use over there as well, as long as there's no other like serious harm that's going to be caused from that. These are just some extra things here that I wanted to give here, and this is because, of course, the modern day things that we encounter, it's important that we look at them and understand them, and it's like this is of the obligatory things like fard ayn upon us when we are looking at fasting, and we're going to be going into this, then we know what breaks the fast, of course, so that we can stay away from these things. Allah Ta'ala. Any other questions before we move on?
What about if somebody's addicted to cigarettes and they do like a nicotine patch?
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. And because it's not going into the jawf. It's something that's being absorbed. That's fine. Just like creams and ointments. Yeah.
But you nourish the body, right?
It's not nourishment. It's putting a chemical into your body, but it's not nourishment, and it's not going into a jawf. It's not going into an opening that is it's receiving nourishment. That's what we're looking at. Is it going into an opening or no? All right. The same thing if someone gets a shot. That shot, even if there's something that they need, a certain vitamin or whatnot, this is going over in here. Like this is not actually breaking their fast, because it's not going into their opening that they would get this. Yeah, as opposed to a feeding tube. You know.
What if the feeding tube is like through here?
It's going into a jawf. If it's going into the actual belly itself, then no. It would break the fast, because this is actual going into the jawf. Like this is the actual part of the jawf. This is connected to the jawf. As opposed to going into the muscle. The muscle itself is not a place of nourishment. As opposed to going into the actual like belly itself to receive nourishment. In this case, it would break it. Allah Ta'ala. Any other questions? All right. So the next thing the author here will go into, he's going to go into some of the things that are mustahab for this. And he brings 3 things here, and there's many more of these things than just 3. I'll mention some of them that are mentioned in Iqna. But he says here, وَيُسْتَحَبُّ فِي الصَّوْمِ ثَلَاثَةُ أَشْيَاء. And so there's 3 things here he mentions that are mustahab. And تَعْجِيلُ الْفِطْرِ وَتَأْخِيرُ السُّهُورِ. And so he says ta'jil, which is like hurrying or rushing towards doing this, the fitr, and breaking the fast. And so this is of the things of the of course the best way to break the fast was the best thing to break it on. The best thing to break it on is 3 rutab. And rutab is rutab is the wet, say like as opposed to dry date, it's fresh dates, because this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he would break it on rutab, and this is before he would pray. So he would break it on a 3 rutab before he would pray. And if he didn't have that, then he would do it with tamar, and tamar of course is the dry dates. And then and if he didn't have this, then he would use water. He would use a little bit of water, not like a ton, but something just enough to give you a little refreshment before going into salah. Because of course, someone, if they're pigging out right before salah, like this is going to take a long time. And of course, maghrib is something that should be prayed on time. It shouldn't be delayed a long period of time. And also, you can wait till afterwards. Like that whole meal doesn't need to be taken before maghrib, like in that one big thing. So of course, like having just a little bit of something to carry you over, and then after maghrib, going and eating. This is something that, of course, is better to respect, like the time of the prayer. And also, this is what the Prophet ﷺ, he would do, is he would eat just a little bit or drink just a little bit before the prayer, and then he would pray maghrib right away. And so this is the ta'jil al-fitr. And of course, someone should, fitr itself is obligatory. Like to actually break the fast, this is obligatory. Between 2 days, if you have one day that you're fasting and the next day you're fasting, you need to break that fast in between these. But doing it quickly is sunnah. But like this is something that's because the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited people from doing wisal, and wisal is connecting one day's fasting with the next. So the person is prohibited to do it one day and fast the next day without eating anything, drinking, or breaking that fast in between. He's prohibited from doing this. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to do it, and then when he was asked, but we see that you're prohibiting people, but then you do it, he said, and then he'd said that my Lord feeds me in ways that He doesn't feed you, or like in ways that you wouldn't know, and so that Allah gives him sustenance in a way that's not like other people. So this is of the khasa'is, or like the things that are special for the Prophet ﷺ. As we talked about his af'al, some of them are specific for him, and this is something that he says, this is something that Allah does for me. So this is something we say, this is for the Prophet ﷺ. But for everyone else, then they need to break their fast. Every single between one fast to the next, they need to break it. And so, but of course, doing it quickly. This is sunnah. This is also the sunnah of the anbiya as well. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith, عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن معشر الأنبياء أمرنا أن نؤخر سحورنا ونعجل فطورنا ونمسك أيامنا على شمائلنا في صلاتنا على شمائلنا, which is like, you put the right hands on the left hands in our salah. And so he says that he's like referring to معشر الأنبياء. This is منسوب على الاختصاص. أمرنا, which is like we're ordered أن نؤخر سحورنا, and like to delay suhurana. So this is like delaying, what he says here is delaying the suhoor, is that meal before dawn, before the fajr actually comes in, having that meal, because that it strengthens you for the rest of the day. And of course, the point of fasting is not to weaken us and to cause us hardship. Wallahu la yurid, that Allah doesn't want to make things hard upon you, but rather He wants you to do these acts of worship, of course, for taqwa. And so like eating beforehand, this is something that, and delaying that meal until before Fajr by just about 10-15 minutes, this is what is good for people to do. And this is what the Anbiya were ordered to do when it comes to that. And also when nu'ajjila futurana. And so and also to be quick about coming to breaking the fast. And this can be done, as I mentioned, just with a little small something or another. It doesn't have to be a big, huge meal to break the fast. Anything that's small breaks the fast, even if it's just a couple handfuls of water. And to put the right hands on the left hands, aymanina ala shama'ilina. And so to put the right hands on the left hands in the salah. And so these are of the things that are good to do. And also he says here, the third of these three that he mentioned, وَتَرْكُ الْهُجْرِ مِنَ الْكَلَامِ, or هَجْرِ مِنَ الْكَلَامِ. And so he says, and to leave off this is like the bad speech. Like a hujri or a hajri is like bad speech, and so to leave these things off inside of Sawm. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man lam yada' qawl az-zur wal 'amal bihi wal jahl, falaysa lillahi haja fi an yada'a ta'amahu wa sharabahu." And so then the person who doesn't leave off the speaking zur, which is kadhib, and lying about people, and this bad speech of lying and whatnot, and wal amala bihi, and also acting upon this, and also jahl in narration, jahl, which is the actions of stupidity and things that are just ignorant. فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ فِي أَنْ يَدَعَ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. And so then there's no need, what are you doing for, in your worship with Allah, then there's no need for you to do this for Allah. You're missing the point of your worship is for you to actually get taqwa. And if you're leaving off these things, you're doing all these other things, you're losing the benefit of this. Of course, this doesn't mean the person needs to make up this day. If he doesn't, it doesn't mean that his Sawm is not valid and he needs to make it up. No. But rather it means that he's missing the point of Sawm. The point of it, the spiritual point of it, is not to just leave off eating and drinking and jima', but rather it's to get closer to Allah. So if you're doing all these other things, getting and removing yourself from getting closer to Allah, then you're not getting the point. You're missing the point of that. And this is something that we should try to leave off of these things and arguments and fighting without purpose in Ramadan. Of course, we should leave that, and also when someone is fasting. And if somebody gets into an argument with them, they should say inni sa'im. That they say that I am fasting. I'm fasting. Let this person know this is not the time for this. I'm trying not to do this. And this is of the things the Prophet ﷺ told people to do in that situation. And also of the things that someone could also leave off is hijama. as I mentioned before, there's a hadith that comes in it, and some people said it breaks the fast. And while we don't say it breaks the fast in the Shafi'i, we won't say it breaks the fast, we would say leave it, because it's better to leave it. We don't say it breaks the fast or that's haram, but we'll say that's like sunnah to leave it, to leave the difference of opinion. As we always, there's a difference of opinion, leaving it and like doing the thing that is agreed upon is sunnah in this place. And also dhuq and like also leaving off tasting food. This is best to leave it off. I said it doesn't break the fast, but it's best to leave it off. And also it's also sunnah for someone to make ghusl before fajr if from janaba. So if someone needs to make ghusl from janaba, then it's good for them to do this before fajr, before the fajr time comes in, just because they might get water in their mouth and whatnot, and they come into the day while they're in a state of tahara. And also reading lots of Quran. So like reading lots of Quran and also studying Quran. This is the time, like in Ramadan, this is something that, of course, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. And so like this is the month that we should be focusing on Quran and whatnot. And so reading, this is one, it's reading and also studying it is also important. Not just reading the by itself, but also studying the meanings of it. So studying tafsir and going into that and getting close to that. And this is something that's very good to do. And also, of course, i'tikaf, and this will come at the end of the kitab, because we're looking for Laylatul Qadr. Inshallah, we'll talk about that when it comes, and in the chapter of i'tikaf. Any questions about some of these things before we move on? Of course, there's more things than this, but these are the things that I mentioned here with some of the additions from the Qanat. All right. And so the next thing he's going to talk about are the days that it's prohibited to fast on. And so, of course, like we have salah. There's sometimes that it's impermissible for us to pray salah. The same thing with fasting. There's some days that are impermissible to fast. And he mentions 5 of them here. And he says, وَيَحْرُمُ صِيَامُ خَمْسَةِ أَيَّامٍ. And so he says there's 5 days here that are haram for someone to fast upon. And so the first thing that he says here, al-Eidan. And so these are 2, of course, the 2 Eids. Like Eidan is the muthanna of Eid. And so he says the 2 Eids, these days are impermissible for someone to fast on. And this is, of course, because the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited nahad siyam yawmaini, yawm al-fitri wa yawm al-nahri. And so there's these 2 days of fasting should not be, no one should be fasting on the day the Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha. These 2 days are not to be fasted upon. And also to add to that, the wa ayyam al-tashriq al-thalatha. And so also the 3 days of that come after Eid al-Adha. So of course we have 3 days that come at the end. These are days to be eating and drinking. And this is of the things the Prophet ﷺ said, that these days are eating and drinking, that they should be done in this time. And so there's also a couple other days that are disliked. And of them, he's going to mention here, وَيُكْرَهُ. He says here, وَيُكْرَهُ صَوْمُ يَوْمِ الشَّكِّ إِلَّا أَن يُوَافِقَ عَادَةً لَهُ. And so he says also yukrah, which is that it's disliked. And in general, if something is makruh, then someone doing this action will not be accepted. So first off, if you're trying to do an action, it's already prohibited, whether in a soft sense or in a hard sense. It's prohibited. So how are you going to get close to Allah with something that He prohibited, whether in a immediate sense or you're going to get a punishment for doing it, or I'm telling you not to do it. So how are you going to get closer to Allah with this? So this day would not be accepted. If someone, the Yom HaShak here is this is that day, the 30th day of Sha'ban, that people think, are we going to see the moon tonight or no? So this day that everyone's wondering, are we going to see the moon tonight or no? That day that will be the 30th, either it's going to be the 30th or it's going to be the first day of Ramadan. We don't know. So no one has seen the moon yet, and they're talking about it. This day, it's impermissible for you to say, I'm going to fast this day just in case. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited someone from doing this. And it comes in a hadith that Ammar, he said, Man sama al-yawm alladhi yashukku fihi an-nasu faqad asa Aba al-Qasim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And of course, Aba al-Qasim is the laqab of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He says that whoever fasts, this is Ammar, he's saying this. He said, whoever fasts, man sama whoever, this is of course and then صام اليوم الذي يشك فيه الناس, the day that everyone is wondering about, like they're not sure about. This is that 30th day of Sha'ban. And then in this case, فَقَدْ عَصَى أَبَا الْقَاسِمِ, and so he says that he has disobeyed Abu Qasim. And this is of the ways of saying, when he says that this person is disobeyed, we would take from this that the Prophet ﷺ negated this. Him saying that he has disobeyed the Prophet ﷺ, we would say this is of the forms that, even though this is him saying it, it would take the form of the prohibition coming from the Prophet ﷺ. And so this is also, he says yukrah here. And this in the Shafi'i madhab, there's two opinions. One of them is that it's makruh, and the other one is that it's haram. And the stronger of the opinions in the Shafi'i is and that it's haram. And of course, like this hadith says, فَقَدَ عَصَى, which means like he's disobeyed. And so like this has the meaning of that this is haram. And this is what a lot of the explainers, like in the shariah for this, they'll say that this is actually haram for someone to fast on this day, unless he gives the exception here. He says إِلَّا أَن يُوَافِقَ عَادَةً لَهُ. And so this is of the person, so some people, every single Monday and Thursday, they fast. Because this is also sunnah. So what if their Monday or Thursday fasting coincides with this 30th day of Sha'ban? That everyone's asking. They fast not because it's the 30th day of Sha'ban, not because they're trying to be on the safe side and fast something that they're unsure about, but rather they're fasting what they normally fast. And so this doesn't fall into that prohibition. And also there's another prohibition for that comes in that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِذَا انْتَصَفَ شَعْبَانُ فَلَا تَصُومُوا. And then if Sha'ban has come to halfway through, فَلَا تَصُومُوا. So don't fast after half of Sha'ban has come through, then you shouldn't be fasting any more than that. So once you have that full moon and whatnot that come out, at this point you'd stop. If you don't have a normal fasting regimen that you do weekly, then you wouldn't fast any extra things unless you're like making up fast. If you're making up fast that was from before, okay, then fast, that's okay. But in general, like if you just want to have extra fasting before Ramadan, no. He says, فَلَا تَصُومُوا إِذَا انْتَصَفَ شَعْبَانُ فَلَا تَصُومُوا. So not to have that fast at that time. And also there's other narrations that is the same meaning here. So whenever the half of Sha'ban is left, then there's no fasting after that, unless there's someone who has a normal regimen of fasting. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And also, if someone were to fast, like I mentioned, if you're doing something that is prohibited, it won't be counted for you. And so, if someone were to fast, it's not like they even fasted. They just start themselves. Like this isn't an act of worship and whatnot. If you're doing something that is prohibited for you to do, you're not doing yourself any good, and in fact, you're actually doing yourself some harm. So someone that goes into that, and so this is something to keep in mind when it comes to these things. And if someone were to they were to swear to Allah that I'm going to fast one of these days, they would have to fast a different day other than this because it's not acceptable. Any questions?
So they say in Shaban, so the Prophet used to fast the most.
In Sha'ban, yeah.
So if he said that you should not fast additional fasting, like if it's not like consistent the last 2 weeks, so
yeah, for the last 2 weeks.
He would do those things in the beginning.
He would do these. There's a couple ways to look at this hadith, but when we talk about ta'arud, this is a great example of ta'arud. So we have this where the Prophet ﷺ said, if half of Sha'ban came, فَلَا تَصُومُوا. He says, don't do it. And if he did something that went against what he said, what do we put first? Do we put his actions first, or do we put his sayings first when it comes to us?
Action.
We would put the sayings. Because if he says something, the saying is clear. It doesn't hold any... We have to obey what he says. And if he did actions outside of this, then we either look at it as if this was something that's special for him, that he used to do, or he's making up for fasting that he used to do, or this is something that was in the first half of it and it wasn't in the last half. Of course, like this last answer can be problematic with some of the riwayats of that hadith, because some of the riwayats of the hadith is that we thought he was going to fast until he was fasting all of it. So this is some of the riwayat of the hadith. But we would take the amr, or like the nahi of the Prophet ﷺ, his qawl, goes before his actions. So if we ever have these two going against each other, when it comes to like a prohibition of something, we'd always put his act, or what he said first. Because this other thing, maybe this is something special for him, or maybe he didn't mean it, or like maybe this was something that was special for him, maybe he was making up other things that he, like maybe had ada that he did before, and he's making it up, or whatever it is. It could be, like there's many different answers for this, but him saying something, someone who's going against what he said, this is hard. As opposed to someone trying to use his actions, going off of what his actions were, that justifying going against what he said. And there's other actions where the Prophet ﷺ, he prohibited someone from praying after Asr. He said, la salata ba'da al-asr hatta taghrub ash-shams. So that there's no salat after Asr until the sun sets. And yet he was found praying afterwards. And so like some people asked, what is this? And he said, these were the two that I missed before, and I'm making them up. But he's also found, like it's narrated in Bukhari, that he also stayed on these two. He never left them afterwards, even though he had the excuse once, he still kept on these two, and this was something that's from his khasa'is, which are like these things that are special for the Prophet ﷺ that we don't follow him on. As we mentioned before with the actions of the Prophet ﷺ, if these actions are something that's specific for him, then we don't take it. But if it's something that there's no dalil that it's specific for him, then in this case we take it. And so the dalil here, like the evidence that it's specific for him, is him saying this in particular. Like him saying to do it, don't fast afterwards. This qawl is something that we would take and say, this is evidence that this is something specific for him, that it's special for him. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And of course this is an area of difference of opinion. So if you do see somebody doing this is something you wouldn't do inkar. Like you wouldn't do heavy inkar because it's a different, it takes ijtihad to look at this issue. You could say the Prophet ﷺ said this hadith, and this is the view of many scholars and whatnot. You can give nasiha, but don't do inkar on somebody if they're fasting afterwards. Because if they're holding on to the opinion of a scholar that says it's okay to do, then they're following someone. Allah ta'ala a'lam. And so here he also says, the next thing, he's going to talk about the kafara for the person who breaks their sawm with jima'. For the person who breaks their sawm with jima', this person has a kafara on them, and this is only for this person that did this. It's the rest of anyone who broke their fasting in a different way than this, then they would make up the day only. But for someone who broke their fast with jima', then they have the kafara, and he'll talk about this here. He says, وَمَنْ وَطِئَ فِي نَهَارِ رَمَضَانَ عَامِدًا فِي الْفَرْجِ فَعَلَيْهِ الْقَضَاءُ وَالْكَفَّارَةُ. And so he says, whoever wati'a, like wat is like intercourse, and fi nahari Ramadan, and this is in the day of Ramadan, amidan, so he's like doing it purposefully, fil farj. Of course, it needs to be an actual, like it actually has to have penetration from the head disappearing inside of the farj. And so like this is, without this, then of course he would just have, like if he broke his fast in a different way other than this, he would just make up the fast. He would do the qada. But he says here, if he did it in all of these ways, then he needs to make it up, one, al-qada wal-kaffara. And he also needs to pay the kafara on top of this. And this only happens if it's in its actual intercourse with man, woman, or like or even if it was like something other than a woman. But if it's in a farj, then they would have the kafara on this person. Yeah, and this is mentioned. A'udhu billah. And so he says here, وَهِيَ إِتْقُ رَقَبَةٍ. And so, in this person would have to do either free a slave, إِتْقُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ. And so he would have to free a believing slave, and of course فَإِن لَمْ يَجِدْ. So this is on each one of these, is if he doesn't find this is the first one. And if he can't do this one, then he goes to the next thing. فَإِن لَمْ يَجِدْ. And so if he doesn't find a slave to free, فَصِيَامُ شَهْرَيْنِ مُتَتَابِعَيْنِ. And so then he would have to do fast 2 months, مُتَتَابِعَيْنِ, which means every single day after another. So this is the payment for someone who makes who breaks their fast with that breaks their fast in Ramadan with jima'. And so and so like then he would have to fast 2 months without any breaks in it until he finishes that off. And فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ, then he says, and if he's physically not able, like فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ ذَلك, like if he's not able to do this, فَإِطْعَامُ سِتِّينَ مِسْكِينًا. And then if he's not able to do this, then he would give out for each one of the days, or he would give out the one thing of, he would feed one miskin, one poor person. And he says here, sittina miskina, which is 60. So he'd feed 60 poor people. Likulli miskinin muddun. And for each miskin is a mud. And of course, we talked about a mud before, is the 1/5 of a gallon, or 0.2 gallons. This is one mud, and it'd be like of the ta'am, or like it would be like the qut of that particular land, which is that staple food of that land. He would give out that to one miskin, and of course it would need to be like 60 people. He would need to give it to actual 60 people, not just to one person. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so this is if he's not able to do this siyam 2 months in a row. So if he can't do 2 months in a row, then he would need to do this. Then he can do the last one, which is this. And this comes from a hadith that one of the Sahabis came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, halakt, like I've been destroyed. And the Prophet ﷺ said, ma ahlakak. And so, or malak. He replied to the Prophet ﷺ and said, waqatu ala imrati wa ana sa'im. He says, waqatu ala imrati, like I fell upon her. Of course, like I had intercourse, is kinaya, with my wife when I was fasting. He's fi riwayatin fi Ramadan. Of course, like when it was in Ramadan. He says, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, hal tajidu raqaba ta'atikuha. And so, like, do you find a slave to free him? And he says, la. He said, no. فَهَلْ تَسْتَطِيعَ أَن تَصُومَ شَهْرَيْنِ مُتَتَابِعَيْنِ. He says, and are you able to fast 2 months in a row? And he says, la. And he says, فَقَالَ فَهَلْ تَجْدُ إِطْعَامُ سِتِّينَ مِسْكِينًا. And then he says here, la. He says, no. And so then he says, فَمَكَثَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. Like the person narrating the hadith says, so the Prophet sat there for a little bit and waited. فبين نحن على ذلك أتى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بعرق أوتي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بعرق فيه تمر. And then the Prophet ﷺ was given arak, which is like a bunch of dates that's still on the vines. It's like still on the vines and whatnot, that had a bunch of tamar, of course. And so he was given this, of course, so he can feed. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he says here, miktal. And he says here, فَقَالَ أَيْنَ السَّائِلُ. So he asked, like, who's the person that was asking about this? And فَقَالَ أَنَا. And so he's talking about who's the one who asked about this issue that he had, where he needed to go through all these things. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said to him, خُذْ هَذَا فَتَصَدَّقْ بِهِ. And so he says, take this and use this to do sadaqah, and for the sittin miskin that he needs to feed from that. فَقَالَ الرَّجُلُ أَعَلَى أَفْقَرَ مِنِّي يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. He says, and am I supposed to give sadaqah on someone that is more poor than me? Like, this guy's poor. Dirt poor. He's like, I'm the poorest guy around. Like, who am I supposed to give this to other than me? You're like, I'm very poor. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he says here, for what this is what the rest of what the man says here. Radiallahu anhu. He says, for wallahi ma bayna lavatayha yurid al-harratayn. So he says, like, between lavatayha is like the two big mountains on either side of him. There's no one between these two mountains, like Ahlul Bayt, afqara min Ahl Bayti. Like, there's no other family that's more poor than my family. He's like swearing, and by this. And فَضَحِكَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ حَتَّى بَدَتْ أَنْيَابُهُ. And so, of course, like the Prophet ﷺ was laughing or like smiling from this, like seeing this man was very clear about his state of being with him, and until you could see like his anyab, which are like the back teeth, and not all the way like this is the wahik, but like the anyab are these teeth. And so he says, ثُمَّ قَالَ أَطْعِمْهُ أَهْلَكَ. He says, and feed your family. And so with this. And so this is a hadith that is the basis for this kafara. And there's a couple things. I'll just talk about the hadith and we'll end with this hadith. There's a couple issues in this hadith. One of them is that the man ended up feeding his own family with what the Prophet ﷺ gave him. And as we talked about before in zakah, is it permissible for a man to give zakah in his own family? No, because he's supposed to feed them already. So in like the madhab is that if someone were to do this and they were in a poor situation, they have to give it to other than his own family. And so why are we going against the hadith? You can the Prophet ﷺ allowed him to do this. The man was given this from the Prophet ﷺ, and this was the sadaqah, like the way the Shafi'is look at it, say this is the sadaqah that the Prophet ﷺ was giving on behalf of him. And so since he's giving on behalf of him, he said you can put it to your own family. But this was originally from the Prophet ﷺ that he's giving for him. Or the other response to the problem here is that this man still needed to pay it, but other to his family. This is a far off response though. But the first response is the stronger one, that the Prophet ﷺ is the one that took on the responsibility of paying for him, and he paid it for him, and then he was able to delegate it to his own family, to that person's family, because it's not him that's doing it, but rather he is the one who's paying it. So he's not paying to his own family, but he's paying it to the person's family that is most needing, which is his. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. So this is a very interesting hadith, and of course from this hadith many people go in many different directions from the different madahib, from the different views, but of course I gave you here like the Shafi'i opinion in that, and also explaining the hadith, and we can also see of course the beautiful character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course if you ever just read a lot of these hadiths and think about the way that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam dealt with these people. Of course this man, first and foremost, he did a major sin, and he came to the Prophet ﷺ knowing that he did this and he wanted to make it right. And of course the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't do tanfir, or he didn't get on his case, but rather he was very, very soft and gentle in the way that he worked with him, even though he gave him the hukam. And so of course there's many benefits of reading the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, you can see just the character of him and the way he dealt with people is really amazing. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.